Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. The white dress wasn't mine. The ballroom, full of Manhattan billionaires, definitely wasn't my scene. And the most powerful man in New York absolutely shouldn't be walking toward me with that devastating smile. Finally, murmured Ethan Carter, CEO of the largest tech empire on the East Coast, pulling me by the waist before I could protest. I thought you weren't going to show, sweetheart. I think you're confused. I never finished the sentence. His lips touched mine in a kiss that made the world stop spinning. Camera flashes exploded around us. 300 guests from New York's elite applauded, and there I was. Emma Thompson, high school literature teacher earning $42,000 a year, being kissed by America's most coveted bachelor. When we separated, he whispered in my ear, "Thank you for agreeing to pretend to be my fiancée, Olivia." Olivia? Olivia? Ethan? I'm not Olivia. I managed to stammer, still dizzy from the kiss. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. His ocean blue eyes widened in realization. Oh snap! It was exactly at that moment when an elegant elderly woman approached, beaming, covered in diamonds that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. "Ethan, darling, what a beautiful young woman. When's the wedding?" I need to call the Times for coverage, and that's how I found myself trapped in the biggest lie of my life, next to the most dangerous man for my heart, pretending to be his fiancée for a family I didn't even know. The worst part? I was starting to like it. "Mrs. Carter," I began, trying to explain. "Oh, honey, call me Grandma Eleanor. If you're marrying my grandson, you're already family." She hugged me with surprising strength for her 80 years. "Ethan, she's even more stunning in person. And that dress, absolutely divine." Ethan wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me against him. The warmth of his body and the scent of his expensive cologne were doing strange things to my stomach. "Grandmother, Emma is special." Emma. At least he remembered my real name. Emma. What a lovely name. Eleanor clapped her hands. "Darling, tell me everything. How did you two meet? Was it love at first sight?" Ethan's always been such a workaholic. I thought he'd never find the right woman. I looked at Ethan in panic. He gave me a smile that probably closed billion-dollar deals. "Well, Grandma Eleanor, actually, we met at the New York Public Library." Ethan interrupted smoothly. "Emma was reading Jane Austen. I made a comment about Pride and Prejudice, and, well, the rest is history. Liar. Gorgeous, charming, completely irresistible liar, but still a liar." "Oh, how romantic," Eleanor sighed. "Just like my George, may he rest in peace." He won me over discussing Shakespeare in Central Park. More people approached politicians, CEOs, people I only saw on television, everyone wanting to meet Ethan Carter's fiancée. And there I was, a teacher from Queens who shopped at Target, pretending to belong in New York's most glamorous world. "Darling," Ethan murmured in my ear, his voice sending shivers down my spine. "We need to talk privately." He guided me through the crowd to a private terrace overlooking all of Manhattan. The city sparkled below like diamonds scattered across black velvet. "Okay, let me explain," he began, running his hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. "I hired an actress to pretend to be my fiancée tonight, Olivia Bennet. She was supposed to earn $50,000 for one night of acting, $50,000 more than my annual salary. And where is this Olivia? Good question." Ethan glanced at his gold watch. "She should have arrived 2 hours ago. Apparently, she decided it wasn't worth it. So, you saw me in a white dress and assumed I was your rent, a fake fiancé." I crossed my arms, trying to look annoyed instead of fascinated by this impossible man. "In my defense, you were in the right place at the right time, wearing the right color." He stepped closer, and I could see tiny golden flecks in his blue eyes. "And when I saw you, I forgot to think straight. Very convincing, Mr. Carter." "Ethan, and I'm being sincere." He placed his hands on my shoulders, sending waves of heat through my body. "Look, Emma, I know this is insane. I know you don't know me, don't owe me anything, but I need your help desperately." "Why?" "You're Ethan Carter. You're on the cover of Forbes. You could have any woman you want." "Not any woman. Not for this." His smile turned sad. "My grandmother is sick. Emma cancer. The doctors say she has maybe 6 months. The only thing she wants before she passes is to see me married and happy. It's foolish, I know. But it's not foolish, I interrupted gently. It's love. He looked at me with surprise, as if no one had ever understood before. Exactly. It's love. His voice became hoarse, and I'd do anything to give her that peace of mind. Anything. At that moment, the terrace door opened, and a stunning blonde woman appeared. Designer dress. Jewelry that cost more than cars. Everything too perfect. Ethan, there you are. She approached with a predatory smile. Your grandmother was telling me about your little fiancé. How adorably. The way she said adorable made it sound like an insult. Isabella, Ethan sighed. Emma. This is Isabella Langston. Isabella, my fiancée. Emma Thompson. Isabella analyzed me from head to toe, as if I were something stuck to the sole of her Louboutin. Thompson. How ordinary. She smiled venomously. And what do you do for work, honey? I'm a teacher. Oh. The word came out as if I'd said, I cleaned sewers. How nice. Elementary school? High school? English literature. How noble. Isabella turned to Ethan, practically ignoring me. Ethan, darling, you always said you'd marry someone from your level, someone who understands your world. Her condescension made me see red, but before I could respond, Ethan wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me against him. Isabella. Emma understands my world perfectly. In fact, she makes me want to be a better person. He looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race. Isn't that right, sweetheart? And then, without warning, he kissed me again. But this time it was different, slower, deeper, more real, as if he had forgotten we were pretending. As if he had forgotten Isabella was there, as if only the two of us existed on that terrace under the New York stars. When we separated, we were both breathless. Isabella had disappeared, and I was lost in Ethan Carter's blue eyes. Emma, he murmured, still holding me. Yeah, I think I just complicated things tremendously. Why? He smiled, and it was the most beautiful and dangerous smile I'd ever seen, because now I don't know if I'm still pretending. This is absolutely insane, I whispered as Ethan guided me through the crowd of America's elite, his hand warm against my lower back. I teach teenagers Shakespeare. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. I'm definitely not fiancé material for a billionaire. Actually, he murmured, nodding politely at a senator who raised his champagne glass at us, you're perfect. Olivia was supposed to be an English literature professor. Close enough. Close enough? I nearly choked on the champagne he'd pressed into my hands. Where is this Olivia person anyway? Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Apparently, she decided that pretending to be engaged to me wasn't worth the $50,000 I offered her. She never showed up. Went million. My entire year's rent for one night of pretending, and you assumed I was her because white dress, right timing, wrong woman, obviously. He paused as his grandmother approached again, this time with what looked like half of Congress in tow. Look, Emma, you remembered my name. I remember everything important. The way he said it made my stomach flip. I need your help. My grandmother has been trying to marry me off for 3 years. She's threatened to donate my entire inheritance to charity if I'm not engaged by my 35th birthday, which is next month. I stared at him. Are you seriously asking me to fake an engagement to you? A complete stranger. A complete stranger who kisses like that? Interrupted a familiar voice. We turned to find my best friend Rachel appearing with a tray of appetizers, grinning wickedly. Girl, when you said you were working a catering gig tonight, you forgot to mention you'd be serving yourself as the main course. Heat flooded my cheeks. Rachel, this is Ethan Carter. Ethan extended his hand with that devastating smile that probably closed billion-dollar deals. And you must be the friend who's going to help convince Emma to save my life. Rachel's eyes widened as she nearly dropped her tray. Holy smokes. You're the Ethan Carter, the tech genius, the billionaire bachelor, the guy who was on the cover of Fortune last month. And currently, he said, his eyes never leaving mine, the guy who desperately needs a fake fiancé. The thing about fairy tales is they never warn you about the moment when Prince Charming offers you everything you never knew you wanted, and you have to decide whether you're brave enough to take it. Looking into Ethan's blue eyes, surrounded by the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, I realized I was about to find out exactly how brave I really was. Okay, I heard myself say, but I have conditions. Name them. First, this stays strictly business. No blurred lines, no confusion about what this is. Agreed. Second, when your grandmother gets her peace of mind and you get your inheritance, this ends cleanly. No drama, no complications. Absolutely. Third, I took a deep breath. I want $75,000. Ethan blinked. Excuse me? You offered Olivia $50,000 for one night. This is going to be months of my life attending events, meeting your family. Probably being scrutinized by the media. If I'm going to pretend to be madly in love with you, I want compensation for the emotional labor. Rachel snorted with laughter. That's my girl. Ethan's smile was slow and admiring. You drive a hard bargain, Miss Thompson. I'm a New York teacher, Mr. Carter. I know my worth. To $75,000 it is. He extended his hand for a shake. Partners. The moment our hands touched, electricity shot up my arm. From the way his eyes darkened, he felt it too. Partners, I agreed, trying to ignore the way my pulse was racing. Wonderful. Now, there are a few things you should know about the Carter family before we dive into this charade. We found a quiet corner away from the crowd, and Ethan's expression grew serious. My family is complicated. My cousin Lucas runs the West Coast division and has been lobbying for my position for years. My Aunt Margaret thinks I'm too young and reckless to run the company. And my grandmother, well, she has very specific ideas about what kind of woman belongs in this family. What kind of woman? Sophisticated, well-connected, someone who can hold her own at dinner parties with politicians and ambassadors. Someone who understands that Carter family business stays private. His expression grew serious. If we do this, Emma, there will be galas, family dinners, media interviews. You'd be living in my world for the next 4 months. 4 months, in a world of luxury with a man who made my knees weak, just by saying my name. 4 months pretending to love someone I was already dangerously attracted to. 4 months that would end with me, going back to my real life while he found an actual wife. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, he walked to the bar and returned with 2 glasses of wine that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. But while you're thinking, let me tell you about Carter family Sunday dinners. They're legendary. 3 hours of interrogation disguised as a meal. If you can survive one of those, you can survive anything. Despite everything, I laughed. You're really not selling this. Well, I'm being honest. My family is going to test you, challenge you, try to find holes in our story. But here's the thing. He handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine. I think you're strong enough to handle them. I think you're smart enough to play their games and win. Why? Because I'm a teacher? Because I deal with teenagers all day? Because tonight, in front of 300 people, you didn't panic. You didn't faint. You didn't throw yourself at me or ask for my autograph. He took a sip of wine, studying me over the rim. You looked me in the eye and negotiated like a professional. That takes guts. I sipped the wine, definitely worth more than my rent, and tried to organize my thoughts, but all I could focus on was the way Ethan was looking at me, like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. If I say yes, I said slowly, what exactly would this look like? Well, first you'd need to quit your teaching job. What? I nearly spilled my wine. Absolutely not. I love my job. Emma, you can't be engaged to a billionaire and still work at a public high school in Queens. The media attention alone would be chaos. Your students would be harassed. Paparazzi would camp outside the school. Then forget it. I set down my glass. My students need me. I'm not abandoning them for some elaborate charade. Ethan held up a hand. What if we found a solution? What if Carter Industries sponsored a new arts program at your school? Enough funding to hire 3 new teachers, update the library, provide scholarships for college-bound students. I stared at him. You'd do that, Emma? $75,000 is pocket change to me, but transforming your students' educational experience, that's an investment worth making. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. My school desperately needed resources, and my students deserved every opportunity. There's something else, Ethan continued. My grandmother wants to meet you officially this weekend. This weekend? Family brunch at the Carter estate in the Hamptons. Very casual. Just immediate family, about 20 people. 20 people is casual for the Carters? Yes. His smile was rueful. Emma, I won't lie to you. This won't be easy. My family has money, power, and very strong opinions. They're going to try to intimidate you. And you think I can handle that? Ethan stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made my head spin. I think you're the most intriguing woman I've met in years. I think you're brave enough to tell a billionaire he's not paying you enough, smart enough to see through society games, and strong enough to hold your own in any room. His voice dropped to a whisper, and I think if anyone can help me pull this off, it's you. The intensity in his blue eyes was making it hard to think straight. This was dangerous territory, mixing business with the kind of attraction that could burn down everything in its path. Okay, I said before I could change my mind. I'll do it, but we stick to the rules. This is business, Ethan, nothing more. His smile was mysterious and slightly wicked. Of course, Emma, strictly business, but the way he said it, and the way his eyes lingered on my lips, made me think this fake engagement was going to be anything but simple. So, I said, trying to regain some composure, when do we start? Right now. He offered me his arm, ready to meet the rest of New York society, Mrs. Carter-to-be. As we walked back into the crowd of Manhattan's elite, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to step into a world that would change me forever. And the most terrifying part? I was starting to look forward to it. Let me get this straight, I said, pacing around Ethan's penthouse apartment that overlooked Central Park like a concrete kingdom. Your grandmother, Eleanor Carter, isn't just any grandmother. She's the matriarch of the Carter Empire, controls 60% of your company's stock, and has basically issued an ultimatum. Get engaged or lose everything your family has built for 4 generations. That's the simplified version, yes. Ethan loosened his tie, and I tried very hard not to notice how the motion made his shoulders shift under his perfectly tailored shirt. My parents died in a plane crash when I was 16. Grandmother Eleanor raised me. Everything I am, everything I've built, is because she believed in me. I can't disappoint her, but you also can't actually get married. I've tried relationships. He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. Every woman I meet either wants my money or wants to change everything about my life. I work 16-hour days. I have offices in 15 countries. I'm not exactly relationship material. I stopped pacing. So, what makes you think I'd be any different? Because, he said simply, you were ready to walk away the second you realized who I was. Most women would have stayed for the champagne and the networking opportunities. He wasn't wrong. I had been calculating the fastest route to the exit. And because, he continued, stepping closer, when I kissed you tonight, you kissed me back like I was just Ethan, not Ethan Carter, CEO of Carter Industries. My face heated. About that kiss. It was perfect. My grandmother bought it completely. His smile was pure trouble. We have natural chemistry, Emma. That's not something money can buy. Natural chemistry, right? That's what was making my pulse race whenever he looked at me with those intense blue eyes. My phone buzzed. A text from my landlord. Rent's due tomorrow. Late fee applies after 6 p.m. Reality crashed over me like a cold wave. I lived paycheck to paycheck. My students couldn't afford basic supplies. My mom needed prescription medications I could barely help her afford. The $75,000. I said quietly. When would I get it? $25,000 up front. The rest, when we announce the engagement is over. Ethan studied my face for a long moment, plus living expenses, wardrobe budget, and that school donation we discussed. Enough money to change everything to help my mom, to give my students opportunities they'd never dreamed of, maybe even to take a real vacation for the first time in my adult life. There's more you need to know, he continued. My family is intense. My cousin Lucas runs our Silicon Valley division and has been positioning himself as my heir apparent for years. My Aunt Margaret thinks I'm too impulsive to run the company. And my grandmother, well, she has very specific ideas about what kind of woman belongs in this family. What kind of woman? Educated, well-connected, someone who can handle state dinners with senators and foreign dignitaries, someone who understands that Carter family business is sacred and confidential. His expression grew serious. If we do this, Emma, there will be charity galas, board meetings, media scrutiny. You'd be living in my world completely. 4 months in paradise with a man who made my knees weak just by saying my name. 4 months pretending to love someone I was already dangerously attracted to. 4 months that would end with me going back to my real life while he found an actual wife. I need ground rules, I said. Of course. He walked to his kitchen, a gleaming monument to marble and stainless steel, and returned with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. What do you need first? Separate living spaces? I keep my apartment. Actually, that won't work. The press will expect you to be living here within the week, but you can have the entire guest wing your own bedroom, bathroom, office space, complete privacy. I looked around the penthouse that was easily 10 times the size of my apartment. Okay, second rule. No physical contact unless absolutely necessary for public appearances. Ethan paused while pouring wine. Define absolutely necessary. Hand-holding at events. Maybe a kiss for photos. That's it. What about family dinners? Casual touches. Sitting close together. The kind of unconscious intimacy couples have. The way he said intimacy made my stomach flutter. We'll figure it out as we go. Fair enough. He handed me a glass. What else? Third, I want to know everything about your family before I meet them. Their personalities, their weak spots, what they'll try to use against me. Ethan's smile was admiring. Smart, very smart. I didn't survive 10 years of teaching high school by being naive. All right, let's start with Lucas. Ethan settled into the chair across from me. He's 33, Harvard MBA, runs our West Coast operations, brilliant with technology, ruthless with people. He's been waiting for me to mess up so he can swoop in and take over. And he sees me as a potential mess-up. He sees you as a distraction. Lucas believes personal relationships make people weak, vulnerable. He'll try to prove you're either a gold digger or a liability. Lovely. What about your Aunt Margaret? Margaret is Lucas's mother and my grandmother's sister-in-law. She married into the family 40 years ago and has spent every day since then trying to prove she belongs. She'll see you as competition for social position. And your grandmother? Ethan's expression softened. Grandmother Eleanor is everything to me. She's brilliant, fierce, and can see through any deception from a mile away. She's also romantic at heart. She wants me to find what she had with my grandfather. Real, lasting love, which makes this whole charade feel terrible, which is why it has to be perfect. He leaned forward, his intensity making my pulse race. Emma, if she suspects for even a second that this is fake, she'll never trust me again. And if she doesn't trust me, she'll give my inheritance to charity and hand the company over to Lucas. No pressure or anything. I know it's a lot, but here's what I think. My grandmother is going to love you. How can you be so sure? Because you're exactly what she wants for me. Intelligent, independent, grounded. Someone who challenges me, instead of just agreeing with everything I say. The wine was making me bold. Is that what you want too? Ethan's eyes darkened. What I want is complicated. Try me. He was quiet for a long moment, swirling the wine in his glass. I want someone who sees past all this. He gestured around the penthouse. Someone who cares more about the man than the money. Someone who makes me laugh, makes me think, makes me want to be better than I am. That sounds pretty simple, actually. Nothing about my life is simple, Emma. He stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased all of Manhattan. I have board meetings in Tokyo next week, a congressional hearing about tech privacy the week after that, and a product launch that could change the entire industry. I don't have time for dating or relationships or figuring out if someone actually likes me or just likes what I can give them. I joined him at the window, the city lights twinkling below us like fallen stars. So, you'd rather have a fake relationship than risk a real one? I'd rather give my grandmother peace of mind before she dies and keep my family's legacy intact. He turned to look at me, even if it means missing out on something that might be real. The way he said it, looking at me like I might be that something real, made my heart skip a beat. Ethan, I know. Business only. You've made that very clear. His smile was rueful. Don't worry, Emma. I'm not going to complicate this for you. But standing there in his penthouse with the city spread out below us and the air thick with unspoken possibility, I was starting to think it was already more complicated than either of us wanted to admit. So, I said, trying to lighten the mood, when do I meet the family? Tomorrow. Grandmother Eleanor is hosting Sunday brunch at the estate. Consider it your audition. Tomorrow, Ethan. I need more time to prepare. You'll be fine. He moved closer, and I could smell his cologne again, that intoxicating mix of cedar and something uniquely him. Just be yourself, Emma. That's all she'll want to see. What if myself isn't good enough? Ethan's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing across my cheek in a gesture so tender it made my breath catch. Trust me, he said softly. You're more than good enough. For a moment, we just stood there, his hand warm against my skin, the city lights reflected in his blue eyes. It would have been so easy to lean into him, to forget about contracts and fake engagements, and all the reasons this was dangerous. Instead, I stepped back. I should go. Early morning tomorrow, and I need to figure out what someone wears to brunch with billionaires. Actually, Ethan's smile was mysterious. I took care of that. There should be some options being delivered to your apartment first thing in the morning. You bought me clothes? I bought my fiancée clothes. There's a difference, right? My fake fiancée. That's what I was. So why did it feel like so much more? The Carter estate in the Hamptons was not a house. It was a statement, sprawling across 27 acres of pristine beachfront property. The main residence looked like something out of a European fairy tale, all stone and glass and soaring architecture that seemed to touch the clouds. As our black-town car wound up the circular driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges, I felt my confidence wavering for the first time since I'd agreed to this insane arrangement. Breathe. Darling, Ethan murmured, his hand finding mine where it was clenched in my lap. His thumb traced over my knuckles in what was supposed to be a comforting gesture, but instead sent electricity shooting up my arm. They're going to love you. Easy for you to say, I replied, smoothing down the cream-colored Chanel dress that had appeared at my apartment that morning, along with shoes, jewelry, and a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly salary. You're not the one being auditioned for the role of future Carter wife. Actually, he said with a grin that made my stomach flutter, I think I'm being auditioned, too. Grandmother Eleanor has very strong opinions about my life choices, and she's not shy about expressing them. The front entrance was even more intimidating than the exterior. Massive oak doors that looked like they belonged on a medieval castle, flanked by marble columns that rose 3 stories high. But the real intimidation began when those doors opened to reveal not a butler, as I'd expected, but Eleanor Carter herself. At 82, Ethan's grandmother was still a force of nature, petite, but commanding, with silver hair styled in an elegant chignon and eyes the same piercing blue as her grandson's. She wore a simple but obviously expensive navy dress and pearls that probably belonged in a museum. Ethan, my darling boy, she said, embracing him warmly before those sharp eyes turned to assess me. And this must be Emma. Her voice carried the authority of a woman who had built an empire alongside her late husband. But there was warmth there, too. I stepped forward, acutely aware that my every move was being evaluated. Mrs. Carter, it's such an honor to meet you, I said, extending my hand. Instead of shaking it, she pulled me into a surprisingly strong hug. Call me Eleanor, dear. If you're going to be part of this family, we start as we mean to go on. She stepped back, studying my face with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades reading people for a living. You're even lovelier than the photograph suggested, and you have good posture. That's important for the cameras. Thank you, Eleanor. Come. Everyone's on the terrace. I want to hear absolutely everything about how my impossible grandson finally convinced a woman of obvious intelligence to tolerate his workaholic tendencies. She linked her arm through mine, effectively separating me from Ethan as we walked through rooms that looked like they belonged in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Oil paintings by masters I recognized from textbooks, furniture that was probably worth more than most people's houses, fresh flowers that must have cost a fortune to arrange. But it was the terrace that truly took my breath away. Overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, it was set with a table that could have hosted a state dinner crystal that caught the morning light, silver that gleamed like mirrors, place settings that were works of art in themselves. And seated around that table were the people who would determine whether I was worthy of their world. Everyone, Eleanor announced, her voice carrying easily across the space. I'd like you to meet Emma Thompson, Ethan's fiancée. The scrutiny was immediate and intense. I felt like a specimen under a microscope as 6 pairs of eyes assessed me from head to toe. Lucas Carter rose from his seat first, tall and lean like his cousin, but where Ethan radiated warmth, Lucas was all sharp edges and calculation. His handshake was firm to the point of being aggressive, his smile never reaching his dark eyes. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Welcome to the family. Ethan's told us so little about you. We were starting to think you were imaginary." "Nothing imaginary about me," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily, "though I suppose that's what makes this so special. Ethan and I prefer to keep our private life private." "How refreshingly old-fashioned," said Margaret Carter Blackwell, Lucas's mother. She was beautiful in the way that money could buy, perfectly preserved, expertly styled, but cold as winter. In my day, a proper engagement meant months of parties and announcements, but I suppose teachers have different customs. The condescension in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Before I could respond, Ethan's hand settled on my lower back, a gesture of support that somehow steadied me. "Emma values substance over spectacle, Aunt Margaret," he said firmly. "It's one of the things I love most about her." The way he said love made my pulse race, even though I knew it was all part of the act. "How did you two meet?" asked Sophia Carter Chen, Lucas's wife, who seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. The story in the papers was so vague, and this was the moment of truth. We'd rehearsed this story, but sitting here under the scrutiny of his family, I found myself deviating from the script once again. "We met at a coffee shop near Columbia," I said, the lie coming surprisingly easily. "I was there grading papers, and Ethan was at the next table taking a conference call. When he hung up, he apologized for being so loud and asked what I was reading." "And what were you reading?" Eleanor asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. "The Great Gatsby." My students were struggling with the concept of the unreliable narrator, and I was trying to find new ways to explain it. "Ah, Nick Carraway," Lucas interjected, "the ultimate example of subjective storytelling. But surely your students are too young to understand the nuances of narrative perspective." There it was, the first test. Lucas was clearly trying to dismiss both my intelligence and my students' capabilities in one smooth stroke. "Actually," I said, feeling the familiar fire that always ignited when someone underestimated teenagers, "my students are brilliant. They just need someone to trust them with complex ideas." Once I explained that Nick might be lying to himself about Gatsby, they started seeing the whole story differently. They understood that sometimes the most important truths are the ones we're afraid to admit. Ethan's hand pressed slightly against my back. "Approval, maybe, or encouragement." "And what was Ethan's take on your literary discussion?" Margaret asked, her tone suggesting she doubted he had one. "He disagreed with me completely," I said, glancing at Ethan with a smile that felt surprisingly natural. "He argued that Nick was just naive, not unreliable. We ended up debating it for 2 hours, and I'm fairly certain I won." "You definitely won," Ethan said, his voice warm with what sounded like real affection. "You made me see the entire novel in a completely new way. I'd read it a dozen times before, but never understood what Fitzgerald was really doing until Emma explained it." "How romantic," Sophia said with genuine warmth. "A courtship based on intellectual sparring. It sounds like something out of a Jane Austen novel." "Speaking of romance," Eleanor said, settling back in her chair with obvious satisfaction, "I want to hear about the proposal. Ethan is notoriously private about these things, but a grandmother has her rights." My heart stopped. We hadn't prepared for this question. How was I supposed to describe a proposal that had never happened? "It was," I began, my mind racing for something believable, perfect. Ethan interrupted smoothly, his hand sliding from my back to my shoulder in a gesture that looked unconsciously protective. "I had this whole elaborate planned dinner at Le Bernardin, a string quartet, the works, but then we were walking through Central Park after visiting the Met, and Emma was talking about this student of hers who'd just gotten accepted to her dream college, and she was so passionate, so beautiful in the moonlight." He paused, his blue eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my breath catch, and I realized I couldn't wait another minute. I got down on one knee right there by Bow Bridge and asked her to marry me. "Without a ring?" Lucas asked, his tone skeptical. "The ring was part of the elaborate plan," Ethan replied easily, "but Emma said yes anyway. She said she didn't need a ring to know how she felt about me. It was a beautiful story, romantic, believable, and complete fiction. So why did the way Ethan was looking at me make it feel almost real?" "Well, where is the ring now?" Margaret demanded. "Surely you've had time to rectify that oversight." "Actually," Eleanor said, rising from her chair with a mysterious smile. "I have something to say about that." She disappeared into the house for a moment, returning with a small velvet box that looked like it had seen generations of love stories. "This," she said, opening the box to reveal the most stunning ring I'd ever seen, belonged to Ethan's great-great-grandmother. It's been waiting for the right woman for over a century. The ring was a work of art, a brilliant cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a setting that was both classic and unique. It caught the morning light and threw it back in rainbow sparkles that made my eyes water. "Grandmother." Ethan started, but she held up a hand. "The Carter family has a tradition, Ethan. The heir doesn't just inherit money and responsibility. He inherits the ring that will bind him to his true love." Her eyes moved between us, searching for something I wasn't sure we could give her. "If Emma is truly your choice, then this ring belongs to her." The weight of the moment settled over the terrace like a blanket. This wasn't just about our fake engagement anymore. This was about family tradition, about legacies and promises that stretched back generations. "Eleanor," I said softly. "I'm honored, but I couldn't possibly." "Nonsense," she said briskly. "Ethan, put this ring on your fiancé's finger where it belongs." Ethan took the box with hands that were remarkably steady. Considering we were about to cross a line we'd agreed never to cross. When he looked at me, asking silent permission, I nodded slightly. The ring slid onto my finger like it had been made for me, and when Ethan didn't immediately let go of my hand, I felt something shift between us, something dangerous and wonderful and absolutely terrifying. "Perfect fit," Eleanor observed with satisfaction. "Just as I knew it would be." "It's beautiful," I whispered. And it was. It was also worth more than I'd make in a lifetime of teaching. But that wasn't what made my throat tight with emotion. It was the way Ethan was still holding my hand, his thumb tracing over the ring like he was memorizing the sight of it there. "Now then," Eleanor said, settling back into her chair, "let's talk about the wedding." My stomach dropped. "The wedding? Of course, dear. We'll need at least 6 months to plan properly. I'm thinking spring, maybe April or May. The gardens here are spectacular then, and the weather is perfect for an outdoor ceremony." "Grandmother," Ethan said carefully, "we haven't really discussed timing yet." "Well, what's to discuss? You're 34. Emma appears to be a sensible age for childbearing, and I'm not getting any younger. Spring wedding, summer honeymoon, and, with any luck, a great-grandchild by Christmas next year." I nearly choked on my mimosa. "Children? Well, of course, dear. The Carter line must continue. I assume you want children." I looked at Ethan in panic. This conversation had veered so far from our business arrangement that I felt like I was drowning. "Emma loves children," Ethan said smoothly, though I could see the tension in his jaw. "She's devoted her life to educating them." "Wonderful. Though, once you're married, you'll need to quit that job, of course. The wife of Carter Industries' CEO can't be working at some public school in Queens. You'll have charitable obligations, social responsibilities." "Actually," I said, finding my voice again, "I love teaching. I can't imagine giving it up." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret looked shocked. Lucas appeared grimly satisfied, and even Sophia seemed surprised by my declaration. "Emma," Eleanor said carefully, "I admire your dedication truly, but marriage means compromise. Surely you understand that Ethan's position requires certain accommodations." "Of course," I said, feeling Ethan's tension radiating beside me, "but I think I can balance both. My work is important to me. It's part of who I am." "How admirably independent," Lucas said, his tone making it clear he didn't mean it as a compliment. "Though I wonder if you fully understand what marrying into this family means, the scrutiny, the expectations, the complete lack of privacy." "I'm tougher than I look," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Are you?" Margaret leaned forward, her smile sharp as a blade. "Because this family has been building its reputation for 4 generations. One scandal, one embarrassing headline, one moment of poor judgment, and it can all come crashing down." The threat in her words was unmistakable, and I felt my temper flare, but before I could respond, Ethan's hand squeezed mine in warning. "Aunt Margaret," he said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge, "I think you're forgetting that Emma is my choice, and I don't make poor choices." "Don't you?" Lucas asked quietly. "Because, from where I'm sitting, choosing to marry someone you've known for such a short time, someone so completely outside our world, It seems like exactly the kind of impulsive decision that could destroy everything our family has worked for. The gauntlet had been thrown down. This wasn't just about whether they approved of me, it was about whether they trusted Ethan's judgment, whether they believed he was fit to lead the family empire. "You know what?" I said, setting down my glass with deliberate calm. "I think you're scared." "Excuse me?" Margaret's voice could have frozen champagne. "You're scared that Ethan doesn't need you as much as you thought he did. You're scared that someone from outside your carefully controlled world might actually make him happy. And you're scared that if he's happy, he might not be as easy to manipulate." The silence was deafening. Even the ocean seemed to have stopped making noise. "Emma," Ethan warned quietly, but I was already past caring about diplomacy. "I may not have grown up with money, but I know what love looks like. And I know what fear looks like, too. And right now, looking around this table, I see a lot more fear than love." I stood up, the Carter family ring catching the light as I placed my napkin on the table. "If you'll excuse me, I think I need some air." I walked away from the table with my head high, but inside I was shaking. I'd just declared war on one of the most powerful families in America over a fake engagement for a man who was paying me to pretend to love him. What the heck was wrong with me? The beach was accessed by a private staircase that wound down the cliff face, and I kicked off my designer heels to walk barefoot in the sand. The ocean was calmer than my thoughts, waves lapping gently at the shore while I tried to figure out how I'd let things get so complicated so quickly. That was quite a performance. I turned to find Ethan walking toward me, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder and his tie loosened. He looked like a magazine ad for expensive cologne, all windswept hair and perfect bone structure. Performance? I felt my temper spike again. "Is that what you think that was?" "I think that was you defending me when you didn't have to. I think that was you standing up to my family when most people wouldn't dare." He stopped a few feet away, his blue eyes serious. "I think that was incredibly brave and possibly very stupid. Thanks. Really know how to make a girl feel special." "Emma." His voice was gentle now, and when he stepped closer, I could see the concern in his expression. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just needed a minute to remember that this is all pretend." I held up my hand, the ring sparkling in the afternoon sun. "This ring, this engagement, this whole fairy tale, none of it's real, is it?" Something in his tone made me look at him sharply. "What do you mean?" I mean, he ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in that way that made my heart skip. "I mean that everything you said up there was true about my family being scared, about them trying to control me, and when you defended me, when you stood up to them, Ethan, I know we agreed this was business. I know we have rules. But Emma, the way I feel when I'm with you, the way you make me want to be better than I am, that's not fake. That's the most real thing in my life right now." My heart was racing, but I forced myself to step back. "You're getting caught up in the moment. The setting, the family drama, the pressure it's making everything feel more intense than it is." "Is it?" He moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "Because I felt this the moment I kissed you at that party. Before I knew your name, before any of this started, I felt something I've never felt before." "Ethan, stop." But my voice came out breathless instead of firm. "Why? Because it's inconvenient? Because it's not part of our deal?" His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing over my cheek. "Since when do the best things in life follow a business plan?" I should have pulled away, should have reminded him of the rules, of the boundaries, of all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch. "This is dangerous," I whispered. "The best things usually are." He was right there, his lips inches from mine, and all I had to do was rise up on my toes. "And Ethan, Emma." Eleanor's voice carried down from the terrace above us. "Come back up here. We're not finished with our conversation." The moment shattered like glass. Ethan stepped back, and I immediately felt the loss of his warmth. "We should go," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Yeah, we should." But as we walked back toward the stairs, the Carter family ring heavy on my finger and Ethan's admission echoing in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just crossed a line we could never uncross. And the terrifying part? I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. "You were magnificent today," Ethan said as we stood in the elevator of his building. Manhattan's glittering lights spread out below us through the glass walls. "The way you handled Lucas's interrogation about your background, how you connected with grandmother Eleanor over literature, the way you stood up to Margaret's condescension. I couldn't have asked for a better performance. Performance? There was that word again. Your cousin doesn't trust me, I said, watching the floor numbers climb toward the penthouse. And your aunt thinks I'm some kind of social climber who got lucky with a rich boyfriend. Margaret thinks everyone who wasn't born into money is a social climber. And Lucas. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lucas sees you as a threat to his ambitions. If I'm happily settled, I'm less likely to work myself to death and hand him control of the company on a silver platter. The elevator dinged softly as we reached his floor, but neither of us moved to get off. The space suddenly felt smaller, more intimate, charged with the electricity that had been building between us all day. Is that what you want? I asked quietly, finally turning to face him fully. To work yourself to death for a company that your family seems more interested in controlling than supporting. It's what I've always done. He leaned against the elevator wall, and for the first time since I'd known him, Ethan Carter looked tired, not just physically exhausted, but soul-deep, weary. My parents built Carter Industries from a small software company into one of the most influential tech corporations in the world. When they died, I promised myself I'd make it even bigger, even more successful. Mission accomplished, I suppose, but somehow it never feels like enough. Maybe because you've been so focused on building their dream that you never figured out what your own dreams look like. The elevator doors started to close, but Ethan caught them with his hand, holding them open while he studied my face with those penetrating blue eyes. When did you become so wise about things you know nothing about? I teach high school, remember? Half my job is helping kids figure out who they are versus who everyone expects them to be. I stepped past him into the hallway, acutely aware of how his cologne seemed to wrap around me. Sometimes the lessons go both ways. His penthouse felt different tonight, more intimate somehow, despite its vast size and minimalist perfection. Maybe it was the way the city lights painted everything in gold and silver, or maybe it was the weight of the family ring on my finger, a constant reminder of how deep we'd waded into this deception. Drink? He offered, already heading toward the bar cart that probably cost more than most people's cars. I should go home. Why? The simple question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us were ready to voice. Why should I go back to my cramped apartment in Queens when I could stay here in this palace overlooking Manhattan? Why should I maintain the distance I'd insisted on when every moment with Ethan made me want to close the gap between us? Because, I said finally, we've been on all day. Don't you need a break from pretending? Ethan poured himself a scotch, something expensive and amber that caught the light like liquid gold, and turned to face me. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made my pulse quicken. Is that what you think we've been doing today? Pretending? Haven't we? He set down his glass and walked toward me slowly, deliberately, like a predator who'd finally decided to stop playing with his prey. When I defended you to Margaret this afternoon, was I pretending? When I watched you light up talking about your students' achievements, was that fake? When I couldn't take my eyes off you during brunch because you were the most fascinating person at that table, was that part of our business arrangement? My breath caught as he stopped just inches away, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, close enough to count the dark lashes that any woman would kill for. Ethan, I said, I know what our rules are. I know what our rules are, Emma. I wrote them, but somewhere between that first kiss at the charity gala and today, something changed for me. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheek with devastating gentleness. I'm not pretending anymore. You have to be, I whispered, even as I leaned into his touch like a flower turning toward sunlight, because I can't do this if it's real. Why not? Because you're Ethan Carter. You're on the cover of Fortune magazine. You have senators at your family dinners and buildings named after your ancestors. And I struggled to find words that could encompass the vast distance between our worlds. I'm nobody special. You're just what? His other hand found my waist, pulling me closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Brilliant. Beautiful. The first person in years who challenges me to think differently about everything. His voice dropped to a whisper. The woman who walked into my world without asking for anything and somehow made everything make sense for the first time in my life. I'm temporary, I said desperately, trying to hold on to reality even as his proximity made my head spin. That was the deal. 4 months. And then I go back to my real life, while you find someone actually suitable for your world. Deals can be renegotiated. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine, giving me every opportunity to step away, to maintain the boundaries we'd agreed upon. But I didn't want to step away. I wanted to melt into him and forget about all the logical reasons why this was impossible. "This is dangerous," I murmured, but my hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling his heartbeat through the expensive cotton of his shirt. The best things usually are. When his lips touched mine this time, it wasn't for cameras or family members or any audience except the glittering city below. It was soft and sweet and desperate all at once, like he was trying to pour months' worth of suppressed feelings into a single kiss. And heaven help me, I kissed him back just as desperately, my hands fisting in his shirt as if I could anchor myself to this moment and make it last forever. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, and I could see my own confusion and desire reflected in his eyes. "Stay," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. "Ethan, just stay. We don't have to decide anything, or define anything, or figure anything out. Just don't go back to your empty apartment tonight. Stay here with me." It was the worst idea in the history of terrible ideas. It went against every rule we'd established, every boundary I'd set to protect my heart. It was going to make the inevitable end so much harder when reality came crashing back in. But looking at him, really looking at him, not the magazine cover or the corporate headshot, but the man who just kissed me like I was precious beyond measure, I realized I was already in too deep to protect myself. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll stay." His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face from corporate perfection to something warm and real and devastating. "Good, because I have something to show you." He led me through his apartment to a door I'd never noticed before, tucked away behind the main living area. When he opened it, I gasped. It was a library, not just a room with some bookshelves, but a genuine old-world library that belonged in a castle or a university. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined every wall, filled with thousands of volumes in what looked like dozens of languages. Comfortable reading chairs were scattered throughout, each with its own reading lamp and side table. A rolling ladder gave access to the highest shelves, and in the center of the room, like an altar to literature, he was a glass display case containing what looked like first editions of some of the world's most famous works. "This is incredible," I breathed, turning in a slow circle as I tried to take it all in. "How long have you been collecting?" "Since I was 16, Ethan said, walking to one of the shelves and pulling out a worn copy of The Catcher in the Rye. "After my parents died, books were safe. They didn't leave. They didn't change. They were always exactly where I left them." He opened the book carefully, and I could see notes in the margins written in teenage handwriting. "This was the first book I bought after the funeral. I read it probably 20 times that first year. You never told me you were a literature lover." "I never tell anyone. CEOs are supposed to read business journals and market reports, not poetry and novels." He replaced the book carefully, his fingers lingering on the spine. "But you made me remember why stories matter, why they're worth preserving and sharing and caring about." I stared at him, this complicated man who hid a romantic soul behind corporate armor, who filled his private spaces with dreams and stories and beautiful words, while projecting nothing but business efficiency to the world. "Ethan," I said quietly, my voice catching on his name, "I think I'm in real trouble here." "Good," he said, crossing the room to pull me into his arms again, "because so am I." This time, when he kissed me in his secret library surrounded by thousands of love stories, I didn't think about rules or contracts or the inevitable end. I just thought about how perfectly I fit in his arms and how maybe, just maybe, some fairy tales were worth the risk. But fairy tales, as I was about to learn, rarely account for the complications of real life. My phone buzzed insistently in my purse, shattering the moment. Ethan groaned softly as I reluctantly pulled away to check it. "It's Rachel," I said, frowning at the urgent tone of her texts. "She says there's something I need to see. Something about us." "About us?" Ethan's expression sharpened with concern. "What kind of something?" I was already opening the link Rachel had sent, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice. It was a gossip blog, one of those celebrity scandal sites that thrived on destroying people's lives for clicks and ad revenue. The headline made me want to throw up. "Fake love for real money. The truth behind Ethan Carter's engagement." Below was a photo of us from the charity gala, But it wasn't the romantic image that had appeared in the society pages. This photo had been taken from a distance, catching the moment right after our first kiss, when Ethan had that shocked expression on his face. The caption read, "Billionaire CEO Ethan Carter looks stunned after kissing mystery woman at charity gala." But sources say, it's all for show. "Oh no," I whispered, scrolling down to read the article. "Oh no, oh no, oh no. What does it say?" Ethan was reading over my shoulder now, his body tense with alarm. The article was worse than I could have imagined. Someone had leaked everything. The original plan to hire an actress, Olivia's no-show. The desperate improvisation that had led to my involvement. They had details about the $50,000 payment, about the family inheritance ultimatum, about the timeline of our fake engagement, but worst of all, they had quotes from someone who clearly knew intimate details of our arrangement. Ethan Carter was so desperate to fool his dying grandmother that he hired an actress to pretend to be his fiancée. When that fell through, he grabbed the first woman he saw and convinced her to go along with the charade for money. The whole thing is fake. A business transaction designed to secure his inheritance. The real question is, how long can they keep up the lie? Who would know all this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We've been so careful. Ethan's face had gone pale, but his eyes were blazing with fury. There are only a few people who knew about the original plan with Olivia. My assistant, the event planner, and my family. His voice was deadly quiet. Someone at that brunch today figured out what was really going on and decided to destroy us before we could go any further. My phone rang, making us both jump. The caller ID showed Eleanor Carter's name. "Don't answer it," Ethan said immediately. "I have to. She's your grandmother. And if she's seen this," I swiped to accept the call, putting it on speaker with shaking hands. "Hello, Eleanor. Emma, dear." Her voice was calm, which somehow made everything worse. "I assume you've seen the rather unflattering article making the rounds on social media." "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Then you'll understand why I need you and Ethan to come to the house immediately. We have a great deal to discuss." The line went dead, leaving us standing in Ethan's beautiful library, surrounded by love stories that suddenly felt like mockeries of our situation. "She knows," I said unnecessarily. "She's always known," Ethan replied, running his hands through his hair. "The question is what she plans to do about it. Maybe I should just leave. Disappear. Let you tell her. It was all my idea that I seduced you into this scheme for money. At least that way you might salvage your relationship with her." "Absolutely not." Ethan's voice was fierce as he grabbed my hands. "We're in this together, Emma. Whatever happens, we face it together. But your inheritance, your family's company will survive or it won't. But I'm not letting you take the fall for this alone." He squeezed my hands tightly. "Besides, there's something else you should know." "What?" "The article is right about one thing. This did start as a fake engagement. But Emma," he looked into my eyes with an intensity that made my heart skip, "what I feel for you isn't fake. What's happening between us isn't fake. And I'm not going to let anyone destroy that, not even my own family." "Ethan," I said, my voice breaking. "I love you," he said simply, the words hitting me like a physical blow. "I love your passion for teaching and your terrible jokes and the way you argue with me about books. I love that you make me want to be better than I am, braver than I am. I love that you saw through all the money and the power and the Carter family legacy and somehow found something worth caring about in just me." Tears were streaming down my face now. "You can't love me. This was supposed to be temporary. This was supposed to be safe. When has love ever been safe?" He pulled me against him, and I could feel him trembling. "Emma, I know this is complicated. I know our worlds are different. I know the timing is terrible. I know there are a million reasons why this shouldn't work. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I love you too," I whispered against his chest, the words torn from somewhere deep inside me. "I've been trying not to, trying to keep this professional. But I love you so much. It scares me." We held each other in the library, surrounded by centuries of love stories, as our own story balanced on a knife's edge. In a few hours, we'd have to face Eleanor Carter and the consequences of our deception. We'd have to deal with media scrutiny and family betrayal and all the messy complications of real life. But for this moment, In this perfect room full of books and dreams, we had each other, and maybe, if we were very lucky and very brave, that would be enough. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice muffled against his shirt. Ethan's arms tightened around me. Now we go face the music together, and we tell the truth, all of it. How this started, how it changed, what it means to us now. What if she doesn't understand? What if she cuts you off completely? Then we'll figure out something else. We'll build something new, something that's entirely ours. He pulled back to look at me, his blue eyes bright with determination. Emma, 3 months ago, I thought I had everything I wanted. Success, respect, financial security, but I was miserable and didn't even know it. You changed that. You changed everything. The article is going to be everywhere by morning. The media circus, the questions, the scrutiny, it'll be horrible and invasive. And we'll get through it together. His smile was soft and certain and absolutely devastating. Because that's what people who love each other do. They face the world as a team. I looked at this incredible man who was willing to risk everything he'd worked for, everything his family had built, for what we'd found together. It was terrifying and wonderful, and completely insane. It was also the easiest decision I'd ever made. Okay, I said, rising up on my toes to kiss him softly. Let's go tell your grandmother the truth, all of it. That it started as fake but became real. That we were trying to protect her but ended up protecting each other. That love doesn't follow business plans or family expectations or social conventions. I smiled, feeling lighter, despite everything we were about to face. That sometimes the best things in life happen when you're not looking for them. Ethan's answering smile was brilliant. I love you, Emma Thompson. I love you too, Ethan Carter. Now, let's go save our fairy tale. As we left the library hand in hand, the Carter family ring catching the light on my finger, I couldn't help but think that the best love stories weren't the ones that followed the rules. They were the ones that rewrote them completely. The drive back to the Hamptons felt like traveling toward our execution. Every mile that passed brought us closer to what would either be the beginning of our real life together or the end of everything we'd built. The gossip article had spread like wildfire across social media. Fake engagement gate was trending on Twitter. Entertainment news shows were already picking up the story. And my phone hadn't stopped buzzing with calls from reporters wanting comments. Stop reading the comments, Ethan said, glancing over at me from the driver's seat of his Aston Martin. Even in crisis mode, the man looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, his jaw set with determination, his hands steady on the wheel despite everything falling apart around us. I can't help it, I said, scrolling through another brutal thread on Instagram. Listen to this one. Gold digger gets exposed for scamming America's most eligible bachelor. Hope the money was worth it, honey. Emma. His voice was firm but gentle. Look at me. I reluctantly put down my phone and met his eyes. Even in the dim light from the dashboard, they were the most beautiful shade of blue I'd ever seen. Whatever happens tonight, whatever my family says or does, what we have is real. The way I feel about you is real. Don't let social media trolls make you forget that. Easy for you to say, you're not the one being called a scheming social climber in every comment section on the internet. Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might pull over and demand to see my phone so he could argue with strangers on social media. Instead, he reached across the console and took my hand in his, the Carter family ring cool against his warm skin. Do you know what I was doing the night before that charity gala? He asked. Working, probably. You're always working. I was sitting in my office at 2:00 inches the morning, looking out at the city and thinking about how empty my life felt. I had everything I'd ever thought I wanted. Money, success, respect, but I was completely alone. I was 34 years old, and I'd never been in love. Not really. I was starting to think maybe I wasn't capable of it. His thumb traced over my knuckles, sending familiar shivers up my arm. Then I saw you across that ballroom, and something just clicked. Even before I knew your name, even before we spoke, I felt more alive than I had in years. And when I kissed you, when you mistook me for your hired actress and kissed me, I corrected, but I was smiling despite everything. When I kissed the woman who was about to change my entire world, he said firmly, Emma, I've closed billion-dollar deals. I've given presentations to world leaders. I've been on the cover of magazines and given keynote speeches to thousands of people, but nothing has ever felt as important as what I'm about to say to my grandmother tonight. that I love you, that this started as a deception but became the most honest thing in my life. That I'd rather lose everything and build something new with you than spend one more day living the lie I was living before I met you. My heart clenched. Ethan, you can't throw away your family's legacy for me. I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing what matters most. He brought our joined hands to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles. My great-grandfather started Carter Industries because he wanted to build something lasting for the woman he loved. My grandfather expanded it for the same reason. My parents sacrificed for it because they believed in family, in love, in building something bigger than themselves. And you? I've spent the last 18 years building an empire, but I forgot why it mattered. You reminded me. His eyes met mine again, intense and unwavering. The Carter legacy isn't about money or power or impressing society. It's about love. It's about finding someone worth building a life with, someone worth fighting for, someone worth risking everything for. Tears were threatening again, but I blinked them back. What if your grandmother doesn't see it that way? Then she's forgotten what her own love story was about. Ethan's voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes. But Emma, even if she does cut me off, even if I lose the company and the inheritance and the family name, I'd rather have a real life with you than a fake one without you. The Carter estate loomed ahead of us, every window blazing with light despite the late hour. It looked like a fortress preparing for battle, which wasn't far from the truth. Looks like we're not the only ones who couldn't sleep. I observed as Ethan parked in the circular driveway. The whole family is probably here. Emergency meetings are a Carter tradition when scandal threatens. He turned off the engine but made no move to get out. Emma, before we go in there, I need you to know something. What? If this goes badly, if they turn on you, if they try to blame you for everything, I need you to let me handle it. Don't try to protect me or take responsibility for the deception. I got you into this, and I'll get you out of it. We got each other into this, I corrected, and we'll face whatever comes together. Remember? His smile was beautiful and sad and absolutely devastating. Have I mentioned that I love you? Once or twice, but I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, Emma Thompson. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. I love you too, Ethan Carter, which is why we're going to fight for this, whatever it takes. We walked hand in hand toward the front entrance, where the massive oak doors opened before we could even ring the bell. Eleanor Carter stood in the doorway, still elegant despite the late hour, her expression unreadable. Ethan, Emma, her voice gave nothing away. Thank you for coming so quickly. Everyone is waiting in the library. The library at the Carter estate was nothing like Ethan's intimate book sanctuary in the city. This was a formal room designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound volumes that probably hadn't been opened in decades, portraits of stern-faced Carter ancestors glaring down from the walls, and seated around a massive conference table were the people who held Ethan's future in their hands. Lucas was there, of course, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and false concern. Margaret sat beside him, her smile sharp as a blade. Sophia looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. And at the head of the table sat Eleanor, every inch the family matriarch despite her 82 years. Please sit, Eleanor said, gesturing to two empty chairs across from Lucas and Margaret. It felt like facing a tribunal. Grandmother, Ethan began, but she held up a hand to stop him. Before anyone speaks, I want everyone to see exactly what we're dealing with. She nodded to Lucas, who pulled out his phone and began reading. Billionaire's fake love scandal rocks high society, Lucas read, his tone dripping with disdain. Sources close to the Carter family confirm that Ethan Carter's engagement to schoolteacher Emma Thompson is nothing more than an elaborate deception designed to fool his dying grandmother into securing his inheritance. My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I kept my chin up. The couple's entire relationship is fake, Lucas continued, including their romantic story about meeting over literature and their picture-perfect proposal in Central Park. Multiple sources confirmed that Carter originally hired an actress to play his fiancée, and when she failed to show up, he convinced Thompson to take her place for a substantial cash payment. That's enough, Ethan said sharply, but Lucas wasn't finished. The question now is how long they can maintain the charade and what will happen when the truth inevitably comes out. One source close to the family predicts the scandal will destroy Carter Industries' reputation and possibly lead to a complete restructuring of the company's leadership. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the weight of every Carter family portrait judging me from the walls. "Well," Eleanor said finally, "I suppose the question is whether any of this is true." Ethan and I exchanged a look. This was it, the moment of truth we'd been dreading and preparing for. "Some of it is true," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "The engagement did start as a deception. I was desperate to make you happy, to give you peace of mind about my future before he swallowed hard, before you didn't have time to see it anymore." Eleanor's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "And the actress?" Margaret demanded. "The $50,000 payment? Was that true too?" "Yes," I said, finding my voice. "Ethan did originally hire someone else. When she didn't show up, he mistook me for her at the charity gala. I agreed to help him because—" I took a deep breath. "Because he offered me money that I desperately needed." "How much money?" Lucas asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. $75,000, I said, meeting his gaze directly, "plus expenses and a donation to my school." Lucas leaned back in his chair with obvious satisfaction. "So, you admit this whole thing was a financial transaction? You were paid to pretend to love my cousin." "I was paid to pretend to be engaged to him," I corrected. "The love part happened on its own." "How convenient," Margaret said with a cold laugh. "Fall in love with the mark, and maybe the payday becomes permanent." "That's enough." Ethan's voice cut through the room like a blade. "You want to attack me? Fine, but leave Emma out of this." "Leave her out of it?" Lucas stood up, his corporate polish slipping to reveal the ambition underneath. "Ethan, this woman has made our family a laughingstock. Every business associate, every social connection, every political alliance we've built, they're all questioning our judgment, our integrity, our fitness to lead one of America's largest corporations. Our reputation will survive," Ethan said firmly. "It always has." "Will it?" "Because I've already had 3 board members call me tonight asking if it's true that the CEO of Carter Industries has been living a lie for months. They're questioning your mental state, your decision-making ability, your fitness to run the company." "Lucas." Eleanor's voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "Sit down." He reluctantly took his seat, but his eyes remained fixed on Ethan with undisguised hunger. This was his moment, his chance to finally claim what he'd been coveting for years. "Now then," Eleanor continued, her sharp gaze moving between Ethan and me, "I've heard what the articles say. I've heard Lucas's concerns. What I haven't heard is your side of the story, the complete truth, if you please." Ethan straightened in his chair, and I could see him shifting into the confident CEO mode that had built an empire. But when he spoke, his voice was entirely personal, entirely human. "The truth is that I was scared," he said. "Scared of losing you, scared of disappointing you, scared of facing your illness without being able to give you the one thing you wanted most, to see me settled and happy." Eleanor's expression softened slightly, but she remained silent. "So, yes, I hired an actress. Yes. I planned an elaborate deception. Yes. I was willing to lie to the person I love most in the world because I couldn't bear the thought of adding to your worries." Ethan's voice grew stronger. "But then I met Emma, and everything changed." He turned to look at me, and the love in his eyes was so clear, so genuine, that I heard Sophia make a soft sound of sympathy. "Emma wasn't part of any plan," he continued. "She was an accident, a beautiful accident, that became the best thing that ever happened to me. Yes, she agreed to help me for money she needed to take care of her mother and help her students. But somewhere between that first kiss and today, we fell in love, really, completely, impossibly in love." "How touching," Lucas said sarcastically. "But even if that's true, and that's a big if, the damage is done. The media has the story. The board is questioning your leadership. And our family's reputation is in ruins. The responsible thing would be for you to step down as CEO and let someone with better judgment take over." "Someone like you?" Ethan's tone was dangerous. "Someone who puts the family business above personal gratification." "Yes, you mean someone who's never risked anything for love? Who's never put their heart on the line for another person? Who's never understood what our great-grandfather actually built this company for in the first place?" Lucas's face flushed with anger. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan stood up, and suddenly he commanded the room in a way that made it clear why he'd been so successful so young. It means that Carter Industries wasn't built by cold calculation or corporate strategy. It was built by a man who loved a woman so much he was willing to risk everything to provide for her. Every generation of Carter men has understood that until now. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Tell me, Lucas. Have you ever loved anyone more than you love power? Have you ever cared about anything more than your next promotion, your next acquisition, your next opportunity to prove you're worthy of the Carter name? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Lucas opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. His silence more revealing than any words. I thought so. Ethan's voice was sad now rather than angry, and that's exactly why you'll never understand what I'm about to say. He turned back to Eleanor, and I could see him gathering courage for what might be the most important speech of his life. Grandmother, I know I disappointed you. I know I lied to you, deceived you, treated your wishes like something to be manipulated rather than honored, and I know that no apology will ever be enough for that. Eleanor's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. Go on. But I also know that you didn't raise me to be safe. You raised me to be brave, to fight for what matters, to build something lasting and beautiful and true. And that's what I want to do with Emma. He reached for my hand, squeezing tightly. I want to build a life with her. I want to create something honest and real, and worthy of the Carter name. Even if it costs you everything? Eleanor asked quietly. Especially if it costs me everything. Because what's the point of having everything if you have no one to share it with? The room was completely silent. Even Lucas seemed stunned by Ethan's declaration. This was the moment our entire future hinged on not just our relationship, but Ethan's family, his career, his entire identity. Eleanor stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and graceful despite her age. She walked around the table until she stood directly in front of us, studying our faces with the intensity of someone who'd spent 8 decades learning to read people. Emma, she said finally, do you love my grandson? Yes, ma'am, I said without hesitation. I love him more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. And are you prepared to stand by him through scandal, through media attacks, through whatever consequences this deception might bring? Yes, ma'am. My throat was tight with emotion, but my voice was steady. The money was never what mattered to me. Ethan is what matters. Our future together is what matters. Eleanor nodded slowly, then turned to her grandson. Ethan, do you love this woman? With everything I am, grandmother, he said, his voice unwavering, with everything I ever hoped to be. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her sharp eyes moving between us as if she could see directly into our souls. The silence stretched until I thought I might scream from the tension. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Well, it's about time, she said. Excuse me? Lucas looked like someone had slapped him. I said it's about time. Eleanor's smile grew wider. Do you really think I built a 50-year marriage and raised successful children without learning to recognize genuine love when I see it? My heart stopped. You knew? My dear girl, I've known since the moment I met you at that charity gala. Her eyes twinkled with mischief. No actress, no matter how talented, could have looked at my grandson the way you did. No amount of money could have created the chemistry I witnessed between you. Ethan was staring at his grandmother in shock. But the ultimatum about getting engaged, the pressure about marriage, was my way of forcing you to stop hiding behind work and open your heart to the possibility of love. Eleanor's voice was warm but firm. I may be old, but I'm not blind. You've been miserable for years, throwing yourself into the business to avoid dealing with your emotional life. I simply gave you a deadline to figure things out. But the inheritance Ethan began was never really in jeopardy. Oh, I might have donated some of it to charity to make my point, but cut you off completely? Never. Eleanor's expression softened. You're my grandson, Ethan. Your family. The relief on Ethan's face was beautiful to see, but Lucas looked like he'd swallowed something toxic. So, this was all what? Some elaborate test? He demanded. Not a test. Exactly. More like an intervention. Eleanor returned to her seat, looking entirely too pleased with herself. I could see that Ethan was capable of great love. He simply needed the right motivation to find it. And Emma. Well, Emma was clearly exactly what he needed. But the articles, Margaret protested, the scandal, the media attention will pass, as these things always do. Eleanor's tone was dismissive. People love a redemption story, especially one that involves genuine romance. Her expression grew more serious. Besides, the real question isn't whether the media approves of this relationship, it's whether it's authentic, lasting, and built on the kind of values that will sustain the Carter family for another generation. She looked directly at me. Emma, I know this began as an arrangement, but I also know that you've had multiple opportunities to walk away, especially when things became complicated. And you chose to stay. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Mrs. Carter Eleanor, I corrected myself. I need you to know that I never wanted to deceive you. I care about you, and I care about your family's legacy. The last thing I wanted was to cause harm, and yet, you were willing to risk that harm for love. Just as Ethan was, Eleanor's smile was warm and approving. My dear, that's exactly the kind of woman I hoped my grandson would find, someone brave enough to take chances, strong enough to weather storms, and wise enough to know that the best things in life are worth fighting for. Lucas cleared his throat loudly. This is all very touching, but it doesn't address the practical concerns. The board of directors, our business partners, the media scrutiny will be handled appropriately, Eleanor said firmly. Ethan will address the board directly, explaining that while his engagement began unconventionally, his feelings are entirely genuine. We'll arrange interviews with reputable journalists to tell our side of the story, and we'll move forward with dignity and honesty. And if that's not enough? Lucas pressed. If the board loses confidence in Ethan's leadership, Eleanor's expression grew steely. Then they'll discover that this company was built by Carters and will continue to be run by Carters, regardless of their opinions about our personal lives. It was a masterful performance. The family matriarch asserting her authority while making it clear that love and loyalty mattered more than corporate politics. Lucas looked like he wanted to argue further, but even he wasn't brave enough to challenge Eleanor when she spoke with that tone. Now then, Eleanor continued, her voice returning to its normal warmth, I believe we have more pressing matters to discuss, such as when you two are actually going to get married. I nearly choked on my own saliva. Married? Well, of course, you're engaged, aren't you? And unless I'm very much mistaken, you're genuinely in love. So, when's the wedding? Ethan and I looked at each other in panic. We'd been so focused on surviving the scandal and keeping our fake engagement intact that we'd never actually discussed what came next. We haven't set a date yet, Ethan said carefully. Well, let's remedy that right now. I'm not getting any younger, and I'd like to see my grandson properly married before I'm too old to enjoy it. Eleanor pulled out her phone with the efficiency of a woman half her age. I'm thinking May. The gardens will be beautiful, the weather should be perfect, and it gives us enough time to plan something worthy of the Carter name. Eleanor, I said weakly, don't you think we should take some time to what? Figure out if you love each other? We've established that. Determine if you're compatible. You've been living together for months. Decide if you can weather difficult circumstances together. You just did. She looked up from her phone with a smile that brooked no argument. Unless, of course, you're having second thoughts. No second thoughts, Ethan said firmly, his hand finding mine and squeezing tightly. Emma, will you marry me for real this time? Not for business or family pressure or any reason except that I love you and want to spend the rest of my life with you. It wasn't the most romantic proposal in the world. We were sitting in a formal library, surrounded by his entire family, still reeling from a media scandal, having just confessed to an elaborate deception, but looking into Ethan's blue eyes, seeing the love and hope and determination there. I couldn't imagine a more perfect moment. Yes, I said. And the word felt like stepping off a cliff and discovering I could fly. Yes, I'll marry you. The Carter family ring on my finger caught the light as Ethan lifted my hand to his lips. And I realized it didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt like it belonged there, like I belonged there. Like this impossible fairy tale had somehow become my real life. Excellent, Eleanor said, already making notes on her phone. I'll call the wedding planner first thing tomorrow. And Emma, dear, we'll need to discuss your dress, the flowers, the guest list. Actually, I interrupted, feeling braver than I'd ever felt in my life, I have a request. Of course, darling, what is it? I want my students to be there, all of them. I know it's unconventional, but they're my family too. And this whole thing started because I wanted to help them. I'd like them to see how the story ends. Eleanor's smile was radiant. My dear girl, that's not unconventional at all. That's exactly what a Carter wedding should be. A celebration of family, however we choose to define it. As the family began discussing wedding plans with the enthusiasm of people who just avoided a major crisis, I felt Ethan's arm slip around my shoulders, pulling me close. So, he murmured in my ear, "How does it feel to officially be marrying a billionaire?" "Like I'm marrying the man I love," I replied. "The billionaire part is just a bonus." "Good answer." His lips brushed against my temple, "because I have a feeling our real adventure is just beginning." Looking around the room at his family, our family already debating flower arrangements and menu options with passionate intensity, I couldn't help but laugh. "Bring it on," I said. "After surviving fake engagement scandal drama, I think I can handle anything the Carter family throws at me. Even Lucas's bachelor party speech." I looked over at his cousin, who was still sulking in his chair like a child who'd been told Christmas was canceled. "Okay, maybe not anything, but close." Ethan's laugh was pure joy, and as he pulled me closer, I realized that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with a lie and end with the most beautiful truth of all. That love, real love, is always worth the risk. 6 months later, as I walked down the aisle of the Carter Estate Gardens toward the man who'd accidentally become my destiny, surrounded by my students and his family and hundreds of flowers, I thought about how perfectly imperfect our story had been. We'd started with deception and found truth. We'd planned for temporary and discovered forever. We'd thought we were pretending and realized we were finally being real for the first time in our lives. And as Ethan slipped a new ring onto my finger, one we'd chosen together, one that represented our real beginning rather than our fake one, I knew that the best fairy tales weren't the ones that followed all the rules. They were the ones that rewrote them completely. The end.